it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Wait.
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Advancement Amplified, the IA MarCom Shift, a new 5-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Dan Giroux, a higher education marketing communications leader focused on elevating the strategic impact of advancement teams. In this follow-up to Advancement Amplified AI for IA, we're zooming out to explore how advancement marketing communications teams can evolve from reactive, service-oriented roles into more strategic drivers of engagement and philanthropic growth. Through candid conversations with senior practitioners, consultants, and thought leaders, we'll unpack topics like organizational structure, smarter success measures, advanced technology integration, and in-house campaign storytelling amid heightened financial scrutiny and growing pressure to deliver meaningful ROI. Let's dive into today's episode. If you joined us for February and March's 5-episode Advancement Amplified run on artificial intelligence for IA, welcome back. Let's call this Season 2. Last time we focused on the opportunities and impacts of AI on advancement. This time around, we're examining the people, structure, and strategy behind Advancement MarCom. I'm your host, Dan Giroux, and today we're asking a very big question. How does an Advancement MarCom team stop simply taking orders and start shaping strategy? My guest is Terry Flannery, one of higher education marketing's most trusted figures. She's led marketing and communications divisions and teams for multiple institutions, including Stony Brook University, American University, and the University of Maryland, working hand in hand with advancement and campaign leaders. Now, as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the Council of Advancement and Support for Education, she advises institutions and advancement divisions worldwide. That 360-degree perspective makes her the perfect person to kick off the series. Terry, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dan. I'm glad to be with you today.
All right, Terry. Now, I gave the audience a lot of context, probably more than typically do, but I think that's really important for them to understand that you come to this conversation having led marketing communication teams for institutions, and in that role, being a partner to advancement leaders, and now within the CASE organization, really focusing on that relationship with advancement leaders as they navigate the complexities of higher education facing us every day. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, but where I'd like to first start is sort of asking a simple but big question. From your perspective, again, from having seen both sides of the table, how would you describe the current state of marketing communications for advancement?
I'd answer briefly, never more important than it is today. Our roles as marketing and communication professionals really put us in a position to see the widest view of our stakeholders, to understand their perceptions in a really challenging time, to be able to tap a number of sources of data that really help us provide a perspective to our colleagues across the leadership team and across the institution in a way that's relatively rare. Most of our colleagues at the executive level, if you're sitting on the institution's cabinet, have a lens on one set of stakeholders or another, a segment. But marketing professionals get to see the whole wide view. And so I think our perspectives, in addition to our strategic purpose, help us really add value in a way that is very, very important in a very challenging time.
I agree, Terry. And part of what makes this topic so much of a passion to me is I've similarly helped universities develop brands, partnered with the central MarCom divisions, and then having spent almost the last 8 years leading an in-house MarCom team in advancement at a large university. When I look out into all of the thought leadership and the conferences and help being put out there, a lot of it tends to be focused more around overall brand or enrollment and admissions marketing focused. And I'm trying to help shine a light on the opportunity around advancement marketing communications to be a more strategically impactful function. So from that standpoint, are there any myths that you've encountered as it relates to advancement MarCom and how that function tends to be seen or not seen within organizations?
Yes. Before I answer your question, can I just stipulate that in the CASE view of the work, marketing and communications is one of the advancement disciplines among several others that include those who are focused on alumni relations and engagement, those who are focused on philanthropy, those who are focused on advancement services. And all of us, what we have in common is that we are champions of our institutions who are thinking about building value through revenue, relationships, and reputation. All of them are forms of equity that are really important to the institution in meeting its goals. So we have a lot in common. And whether you're in a structure that is reporting to a vice president for advancement, or you're in a structure that is independently reporting to the senior most chief marketing communications officer, either way, you are advancing your institution in some ways that CASE considers it advancement. So let's just stipulate that regardless of structure. Now, the myths, they're there no matter what organization you're in. And those myths are based on a common misunderstanding about the purpose of marketing and communications. So the error of folks who don't really know the work very well or understand it is that it's mainly promotion. And of course, promotion or strategic communication in service of a broader marketing strategy is one of the aspects of our work, but it's not the only one. And it's very common for advancement leaders who haven't been classically trained in marketing communications to know that that's true. And so they might come to colleagues in marketing communications expecting to help with a message and not really realize that as strategists who look at data and who are measuring and taking regular stock of perceptions of our key stakeholders, they are strategists who are there to help put together a set of decisions that will convey a distinct value proposition for the institution that's motivating to the stakeholders that they care about, particularly donors, alums, right? That will motivate them to engage with the institution, to be supportive, and to continue to be in a loyal relationship over time. Recognizing that we are partners who are strategists who they should be working with at the earliest stages are a really important component of getting over that hurdle or that myth about what marketing is about.
Terry, I want to go back to something that you mentioned in those who don't come from the marketing communications discipline, not understanding a lot of what you just articulated so well. How do you see, either consciously or unconsciously, those misperceptions showing up in the day-to-day nature of how they interact with, how they place requests, what they look for out of their MarCom colleagues?
You might see it play out a couple different ways. One is what I like to call the press release as pizza order. They'll come to me or to my colleagues and say, we need a press release and we need the following 3 things in it. And it's a directive, right? That is expecting that a decision's been made or some sort of announcement is to be made, and that the marketing communications professional will execute, but has no role in thinking about what's the purpose of this action or this decision or this announcement, and why is it important, and how can we make best use of it. So that's one of those common ways you see it show up. Another is that someone who's not classically trained might think that every year there should be a new message. What are the 3 things we're going to say about the university this year? Or how will the annual fund adopt a new message this year that will be motivating, without thinking about the fact that they are very critical. Advancement leaders are critical ambassadors of the institution's brand and shouldn't be varying in ways that are arbitrary without thinking about how do we hearken back to the things that we know are real, rare, and relevant about our institutions that constitute our brand strategy, and how can the things we're doing in advancement spaces reinforce those in ways that leverage the investments that have already been made and that are reinforcing those at every opportunity.
So those misunderstandings, from my experience, again, I've seen it cost organizations, in terms of opportunity, what could have been a bigger, more strategic, more integrated ask became a more traditional mid-level ask. I guess, does that ring true from your experience? Or how are you seeing these types of misunderstandings in the way that colleagues view their advancement MarCom teams? What does that cost an institution?
Well, it's definitely an opportunity cost that you're highlighting, right? At best, it does no harm. And at worst, it's failing to leverage all the other ways that your strategy, your choice, whatever it is that you need to do, is failing to leverage investments that have been made elsewhere at the institution to reinforce the same things that we're all trying to work toward. In any strategic plan, in any marketing strategy, in any advancement strategy, there's an underlying set of assumptions about what's distinctive about the institution, right? And I would posit that most people don't think they have enough resources to help get the word out, to help reinforce perception of the institution's brand. So our resources are stretched, right? If we're doing something that isn't leveraging where the investments are already being made, that's a waste. It's literally a waste because you're starting from scratch with something that isn't kind of reinforcing or leveraging the strategic work that's already been done. So why not think about whether it's the name of the most recent fundraising campaign or an announcement that reinforces a set of key messages? Why not build from the platform that has been developed for your institution that's already doing the heavy lifting or should be doing the heavy lifting, right? You're building on top of that to leverage that. And there are any number of ways where the battles are silly. They're just silly. I remember consulting with a colleague in the last few years who was caught between his president and his vice president for advancement. And he was the marketing communications professional. The president and the chief communications person in the president's office wanted to really reinforce the identity of the strategic plan. And the vice president for advancement really wanted to reinforce the identity of the campaign. And they had connective tissue to it, but they had completely different names. And they're battling over which one was going to win. Well, how do we expect that any of our audiences who we want to be with us in reinforcing how they can support the institution and its most important strategic goals?
As we start to continue to get further into this conversation and talking about the opportunity for more strategic impact, are you seeing any expectations shift regarding the role of advancement marketing communication professionals? As I look at what's happening with the current presidential administration and research funding being cut, and do you think that's starting to push senior vice presidents and vice presidents of advancement to rethink and relook at what that function represents to their organizations?
You know, it's really interesting. One of the places that I thought senior leaders in the advancement space were a little reticent to move is around the thinking about expressing the value of higher education more broadly. While marketing and communications professionals were sounding the alarm that it's kind of the biggest hurdle for us to overcome, broadly speaking, it's affecting our institutions, advancement professionals were thinking for some time that they didn't need to be in that fight. And now it's literally an obstacle that's in the way of meeting their most important goals at the institution. And that's because we've had donor revolts and protests and a lot of activism that's actually might be based in some real concerns about the institution, but is inappropriate in terms of the role that donors should play at an institution. You see real inherent risk in any expression of an institutional leadership position, and advancement leaders know this. They recognize it. So they're pulling their marketing communications colleagues closer, whether they report to them or are colleagues in another part of the institution. They're pulling them closer because they see the tremendous risk and the real threat to the things that they're responsible for leading at the institution. So more important than ever, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, to be working together.
Yeah. Terry, so when I was at Drexel, we concluded our last comprehensive campaign in June of 2022. And I would say the next 2 years, I got pulled in over 2023 and 2024, pulled more and more into the crisis communications landscape as the conduit between those who are in the central MarCom function, working with the president and provost and
Yes.
senior leaders, to then have to translate that message to our entire division. And the frequency and the complexity of that work continued to take up more and more of my time. So is that the kind of thing that you're referencing in terms of bringing in advancement MarCom leaders into more of that dynamic, or other types of opportunities that are so critical?
Yes, absolutely. I think we may have slowed a little bit from the pandemic in terms of daily crisis communication, but we're back in it now, with at least in the U.S. And particularly, we see it in some other regions of the world in terms of political policy positions and policies related to higher education kind of affecting the daily work, but especially in the U.S., which is one of CASE's core markets. We're in it every day with anticipating what is the latest position from the U.S. Presidential administration that is really disrupting, would be the blandest way to describe it, and probably reimagining the relationship between the federal government and higher education. So that daily uncertainty comes with the need to both understand what it means for the college or university and to help our stakeholders understand it. And they may be daily looking for some kind of interpretation or translation of what it means. They might be looking for reassurance. They might be looking to force the institution to express a particular position, which I think has gotten much riskier and much harder. So we're back in that mode of what will today bring, and thinking about how we can monitor for issues management, how we can think about resources that help us anticipate and prepare for those and be as ready as we can be. I know that sounds challenging, but that helps to manage how often that pulls you off of the strategic things that you need to do in your role that will be interrupted when you're in crisis mode every day. And one example of that is just CASE has a federal tracker that CASE members can use, and I'll share the link for you in the show notes so that you can see what is happening. We'll track it for you. That allows you to maybe do a little less of a news diet every day of what's happening, and give you a chance to get a quick read on things that are happening and how they might affect your institution. That just is one of those ways that you can stay kind of up to date about what's occurring. The folks who are leading advancement functions also recognize that very often alumni and donors can be our best third-party endorsers. They can be our ambassadors if they understand. But that means we have to be thinking about them in our overall communication, and we have to have really good ambassadors and translators in the advancement communication space working with our leaders to make sure that whatever is being decided at an institutional level is bringing them in as part of the family, right? If they understand and they know what's happening, they can help be supportive. And so, again, really important right now.
Terry, what you described, I feel, as a tension that perhaps a lot of advancement marketing communication teams experience. And I want to back that up a little bit first to say there are a lot of different models. There are those that label themselves advancement marketing, advancement communications, development marketing, development communications. And I do think that the name signals where maybe the focal point of that team's work is, and resources is always an area of tension of, well, we'd like to be more, but we don't have the ability to have that kind of role in our team, or we've never been charged with those types of responsibilities. But I would say of groups that are kind of stuck in that middle place of, they know they've got experienced marketing and communication professionals who are capable of doing more strategic work than they've maybe historically been asked by colleagues. They see their senior vice president or whoever pull maybe the executive director or that leader of the function into more and more meetings and conversations. How do they start to more intentionally go down that track of becoming seen as a strategic advisor to colleagues at all levels. What signals do you see that suggest that a team is more ready to operate at that level than they have in the past?
Mm-hmm. I do think that one thing that we can be in control of and we can take advantage of when we're invited into those spaces is to embody the mindset of what strategic marketing communications should be. If we don't act like it and we don't set models for what it could include, and it's not just limited to messaging and promotion, then how would we expect our colleagues to know, right? So you got to walk in embodying that with some level of confidence. And that may be new, but there's an expression, I've used this in other speeches and podcasts. The idea that Tom Landry, the famous football coach for the Dallas Cowboys, once used to tell young players, he'd say, when you get in the end zone, act like you've been there before. And what he was telling them was it was about kind of demeanor, being appropriate, not wild, not flashy, not crazy, classy, professional. What he was trying to say is that if you act like you've been there before, you'll be more welcome and accepted in that role, right? So I think when you're invited into those spaces, you have to walk in the door and be prepared to go beyond the role that some might think you're in the room for. So that means, if you get asked about advice related to communicating a certain message, of course, give it. But if there's a decision on the table to be made and you have data that could help inform that decision, or you have perceptions of stakeholders that you think will allow the institution to anticipate how that decision will be received before they make the decision, that's part of your role too. So you act like I have a role in the decision itself, not just in its communication, the pizza order at the end of the process, right? That's part of it, I think. I think you can also think about what can you bring to the table. So those data, those perceptions, maybe things that you can contribute. You can also think about asking beautiful questions. And by beautiful questions, I mean those that are open-ended and help people get curious rather than defensive when you want them to think about something. So instead of saying, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, you might say, how might our alumni who've been invested in this initiative view this decision that we're making? How do you anticipate that they might react? And what could we do to either amplify that if it's a good thing, or what might we do to address their concerns before we announce this decision? The how might we gives people a chance to be curious without being defensive. And so thinking about a demeanor that doesn't suggest you are the expert, suggests you are the facilitator and a partner, a strategic partner in thinking about some action or decision that you're going to make.
Terry, you just gave a masterclass in, I think, leadership behaviors and cultural shifts that can help to facilitate change, positive change teams might be looking for. And I think we probably would both agree that good advice lands more easily when there's trust. And when you have trust, you can have, and use it wisely, more influence. So when we think about influence and building those relationships, which partnership do you think an advancement MarCom leader might want to consider investing first in terms of cultivating more strategic opportunity and more trust? As you mentioned early on in this conversation, there are so many different groups that a marketing communication function could partner with, whether it's on the annual engagement front or major gifts, donor relations, et cetera. If you had to pick one to start, where might you suggest?
Well, we can play chess, not checkers, right? So think about which relationship, if you cultivate it, would broaden the level of trust in the advancement organization if you got that person to really be with you and to see you in the way that you want to be seen as a strategic partner. So you could be thinking about that. It might be someone who's never trusted marketing communications before. or hasn't understood it, but really, really needs something that you know how to do. Or if that's too hard a difficult situation to flip, and I really am speaking situationally. I don't think there's ever an answer that it's always the function X or Y that you should be your first partnership. I think you should be thinking about whose influence can help you kind of radiate what marketing and communications can do if people thought about it strategically. And so if there's a leader who needs something or whose trust and value in your work would make a huge difference, I'd aim right at them. And what I have often done is, especially when I come to a new role, is have some visits with the leaders and ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? What are some of your goals for this year, for the next 3 years? And just listen. Just listen. Let them talk about what they need to do. And if you think about what they've said and then offer either immediately or upon some brief reflection, come back and say, I think I can help you. Some of what we are capable of doing will help you with this goal that you've mentioned. Would you like my help? Can I assist you? And if you do that first, before you ever ask that leader to help you with something, you're going to immediately set the table for a relationship that's more equal, more respectful, and more trusted. You got to deliver on it. But that usually helps to have people know that, one, you're invested in them doing well, right? You're not going to be an agitator or someone that works against their interests. But also you're demonstrating, again, you're acting like you know, and you're showing them what they might expect when you show up.
Terry, I would pull up in occasional team meetings this continuum of, on the left side, you have a service provider function. On the right side, a strategic partner function. And you're not going to be seen as, I think, one or the other by everybody. It's always a little bit of a gray area in terms of where a team might fall on that continuum. But as you just started to describe how to build credibility, what are the types of things that you see happening between MarCom and other teams when they are truly in more of a partnership mode than we'll call it even a vendor mode? I think oftentimes MarCom, their own colleagues feel like, hey, we're being treated like a vendor, not a partner, right? So what does healthy, good collaboration look like?
If there are sides, if there are parties, both parties are thinking about alignment really early in processes, really early in strategic initiatives. And they're aligned around a broader set of enterprise-wide goals that the institution has committed to. So is everybody operating from the strategic plan? Is there a strategic plan? Hopefully there is. And what are the things that we know the institution has to succeed at this year? Starting from there, are you in alignment around those? And if you're not, why not? So I was watching at a case conference recently, a really good couple of pairs of advancement leaders and their counterpart marketing communications professionals, one who was within the advancement unit and one who was a colleague to the advancement leader. And they were talking about how hard it is sometimes, even when a marketing colleague knows that the campaign launch is a year away, and it's really, really important to get time and attention on the strategy for the campaign's prioritization and communication at launch. And they don't reflect the time that's going to be required for the advancement leader to trust that they will be their highest priority. So very often, that advancement leader will turn and go get an outside resource. Then the marketing communications professional is all up in arms because somebody's gone to an outside source that's not integrated with the brand platform and all the things that they're doing. So you have to be a good partner. You have to be anticipating for each other what we will need to do together this year in our own bailiwicks and together as an institution. And if we don't have enough resources, how are we going to prioritize which things come first? because there has to be trust that the advancement leader can count on that marketing communications person or team, wherever they're located, to focus on the thing that has to be done this year that's right in front of them, right? If you can get that lack of trust out of the system, you're already starting at an advantage.
I'm just going to build off that further, Terry. Are there any other pitfalls that you would suggest be avoided when trying to rebuild trust?
Another one might be work it out yourselves. Don't take it to the parents. If two children are fighting and they play mom and dad against each other, that usually is not good for anybody. In other words, the units should try to work through their misunderstandings, their differences, their building of trust in every way that they can before they kick it up a notch to whomever is at the next level. And it kind of depends on to whom you report. But bringing a split like that into the president's office almost never serves the parties well. And so it's in your best interest to try and find a way on your own.
Yeah. So Terry, we're on this journey talking about how teams can consider making the shift, building trust. A big part of that also has to be being able to prove, to demonstrate that the idea you had successfully implemented did actually help us to move the needle in a certain direction. So when you think about outcomes, what are those that tend to matter most to advancement leaders? And I'm not talking about getting in the weeds with email open rates and click-throughs, but the stuff that keeps the moms and dads up at night, if you will, wondering, is our reputation at risk? Did we launch the campaign the right way? What are those top most important outcomes that if an advancement MarCom team can demonstrate that they're adding value to, make a world of difference?
Well, I think it depends a lot on what your institution is measuring in the first place. So if a marketing communications professional is not leading the way in terms of what the baseline measures should be, so that any actions we take, any initiatives that we invest in can be tracked for their progress relative to those key performance indicators, then who else is going to do it, right? Looking at how alumni and donors, among other stakeholders, perceive the institution, favorability, basically, or perceptions of quality or trust should be moving in a positive direction if investment in a campaign has had the effect. Campaign, of course, targets donors at high levels and, all the way down to levels that include annual giving. But they're designed to really rally the institution around a set of core priorities that are in service of some greater goal for the institution. So on offer of value that a marketing communications colleague could really lean into is saying, what measurements are we going to look at 5 years down the road and say we were really successful? So the Ohio State University, under Mike Eicher's leadership, had a wild goal for their last campaign, which had nothing to do with the dollar value. They wanted to engage 1 million donors over the course of their campaign. So they tracked how many donors they had on a regular basis before the campaign started, and then they measured assiduously every year throughout the campaign. They ended up, over the course of the campaign, getting to more than 800,000. So I'm not sure they quite hit it, but that was such an extraordinary stretch over the number they were engaging when they started that they left the institution in a better place with many of its key stakeholders. So that's a really good example of setting the measure, the baseline at the front end that you expect is related to your overall goal for the campaign, wherever those might be. And then be merciless about tracking it and reporting it, actually, and doing it regularly, honestly, making adjustments if something doesn't appear to be working. And those are the really big measures. They're not the ones that are, the open rate there. Do our stakeholders hold us in high regard in terms of trust, reputation, perceptions of quality, affiliation. They want to be with us, right? Those are some basic broad brand measures that you can look at and have those moved over the course of the campaign. And how can you point to specific investments or initiatives that move that forward?
Terry, not every team is going to have an opportunity to maybe present a win as grandiose as, here's a campaign summary, right? But on a more week-to-week, month-to-month, annual, fiscal year-to-fiscal, what are those types of opportunities where an advancement MarCom leader and their team can report positive movement, can report a win, and at the same time without overloading your advancement leadership team with too much information or dashboards or pulling them into the weeds? What's an effective way to keep them apprised of positive progress, or what's the cadence to let them know, hey, we're having some success over here, and if you want to dive into it further, you can, but what's the right way to get visibility with your leadership team?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I'd be interested in what you've used, but I think recognizing how busy people are and that your tracking of all of these measures, everyone else is going to have a more reduced set of time and interest to be able to dive in deeply. So you're pointing appropriately to periodic, brief updates that tell people why your work is important, that you can be trusted to track it, and that you'll keep them updated. So there are a number of marketing communication professionals at institutions have dashboards that they share maybe once a month, and they'll call out a few key highlights that relate back to whatever the strategic initiative, the priorities are for the year, that reinforce in ways that are saying the investment in this work is showing progress. Or if it's not, it's calling out places where something seemed to go not as well as was hoped, and what adjustments you might be doing next year. Next time, whatever that period is. You're right that not everyone invests in a campaign review and report, but the week to week or the once a month, I think the once a month cadence is good for key academic leaders at the institution, colleagues on the cabinet, colleagues who are on the leadership team and advancement. If you can report once a month to say, these are the big things we're aiming at. Here's evidence of our activity affecting those things. And here's an example of one that really went well. Or here's a place where the feedback is telling us we need to make adjustments, and be willing to do that. People will look at a quick report or a dashboard once a month if you do it at a time that's regular and expected, and you've made it easy for them to digest.
Yeah. Well, I'd add to that too. A lot of advancement divisions have, well, at least what I refer to as all staffs, maybe quarterly, 3 or 4 times a year, in services, all staffs, whatever they might be called. And those are great opportunities to have some key wins put in front of your entire division. And if you're fortunate to have a divisional leader who sees and embraces the value of strategic MarCom, they tend to be proactive, or members of their team reaching out and saying, hey, what do you have, to share with the division? So those are great. But it depends. There's different groups you meet with regularly. If you're supporting the entire division, but you're embedded within an engagement faction of advancement, for example, then you're going to want to be discussing with those partners the wins on the specific programs that you're partnering on them with. And you might not always be taking the lead, right? You might allow your alumni relations team be sharing the results and the outcomes, and hopefully they'll give credit where credit is due to their MarCom colleagues and others who have helped in that work. But it doesn't always need to be the MarCom team as well. But I would say on the major and principal gift side, when you do have development writers that are partnering with a chief advancement officer or a dean and their administrative team for a particular school or unit, and you can convert a large gift, absolutely, like jump in and be part of the team that is celebrating that, because it truly can change the course of an organization. So I would say, yeah, the celebration and the sharing of information, again, not a one size fit all approach, but having a plan, being thoughtful of how to spotlight the the more modest to the larger wins is important.
Yeah, I would just add that CASE has some good resources that can be helpful to folks. So whether it's the alumni engagement metrics regimen that we have that institutions are using now, or the performance in terms of philanthropy, the voluntary supportive education survey results that CASE members submit and get great data on, or now are developing measures for brand and reputation that CASE is developing right now. There are examples of measures you can use to draw from if you need some help. And again, I'll share those links in the show notes.
Yep. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I was, as I know you were there, I was at the CASE Summit for Leaders conference recently and did take in a session on a new generative AI adoption framework that I think will be particularly helpful for organizations as, again, they try to figure out how do we weave these tools into the nature of our work, and how do we do that responsively? What do we stay away from? So there's a whole big frontier in that area just alone. But I've found CASE to be, as an advancement professional, really the go-to resource to supplement some of the bigger picture thinking that I'm picking up from other areas like the annual American Marketing Association Symposium for Higher Ed Marketing, which is in November, typically in November every year. You get a lot from the branding, from admissions side, but that tends to be an area where historically advancement isn't quite as covered. And I'm seeing now it be covered a little bit more with some of the content. But this is really more, I guess, a advertisement for advancement professionals to really look into the CASE resources, because they are much more on the nose, I think, than what we tend to find out there on the other side of the higher ed proverbial house. But inspiration is everywhere, so do what works for you. But I found CASE to be a tremendous resource. Terry, I would like to just kind of pivot now to wrapping up, and I've got one or two more final questions for you as we do that. So for all the advancement marketing communication leaders and teams out there that are going to listen to this episode, if they had to take sort of one non-negotiable to adopt today or tomorrow, what would you recommend that be?
Stop doing. You're going to find ways to advise that you're not going to do a press release for a donor that won't get placed anywhere and is just in service of the donor. Or if you are, the amount of time and investment that's spent on that because it's really for the purpose of showing the donor something and it's not going to get picked up anywhere else. You're going to advise that there's a better way to get the result that the advancement leader is hoping to achieve. And you ask, what are you trying to achieve? And see if there are some alternatives that are a better use of the tool. So not pandering to or satisfying the misunderstanding about what marketing and communications can do. Of course, you want to not be antagonistic, but, thinking about reinforcing your role in a way that's going to help people understand that you are that strategic partner. Again, being curious in a way that makes you not a threat, but has you raising some of the best opportunities for thinking collectively with your colleagues in advancement about what it is we're trying to achieve. I think those go back to kind of embodying the leader you want to be seen as, and kind of tie together both something that you should not be doing and something that you really want to model and reinforce regularly. Quick thoughts, I guess.
Terry, I promise I did not lead you on that answer, but I think you hit the nail on the head with what I think is the hardest thing that these teams tend to face, which is how to say no when the request being asked of you is not the most strategic use of your limited resources, is not where your organization needs to be focusing its time. It is so hard to say no when you feel you don't have the agency to do so. So I guess I'm curious, if we take it up now a level to the leadership group, vice presidents, senior vice presidents of advancement, what mindset shift would you offer up to them that will help them embrace the use of their MarCom teams more strategically and open up more opportunity to be more impactful for their organizations?
I think it goes back to them being open to the idea that marketing and the people who practice marketing are in the business of developing value for their institutions in the form of revenue, reputation, and relationships. And that all of those things are important. They're usually particularly important to the goals in an institution's strategic plan. They may not all hit the balance sheet, but they're all really important. And the idea of a marketing professional in their work is to activate that expression of support in the form of revenue, reputational support, relationship development, activate that in the stakeholders that the leadership colleagues around the table are looking for, whether it's legislative relations or, the outcomes that our advancement colleagues are looking for, or enrollment, et cetera. That's what you have in common. You're trying to build value for the institution. The strategic marketing officer is the agent of unleashing that. They're the agent that's able to help you think about how to unlock that value, that expression of value that you need as an institution that's coming in forms that are really important strategically.
Terry, I think part of the reason why I picked the name of this series, Advancement Amplified, is to help illustrate that when you've got a higher performing advancement MarCom team in place, it can have such a more impactful role within shaping those goals and driving strategy. So, well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from misperceptions and some myths to how to build trust and score some wins and shift mind frames. So thank you for helping set the tone for this series. We've got 4 more episodes that will follow this from different leaders and perspectives to share on this topic of how do we shift advancement MarCom to be more strategic. For the listeners out there, if you found this useful, please share it with your colleagues. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss episodes 2, 3, 4, 5. In the next one, we'll be diving into organizing and staffing for impact. We've got some special guests lined up for that. So thank you again. I'm Dan Giroux. Until next time, please keep telling those stories, raising sites, deepening relationships, and making your work matter.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.